Mr. Burgess for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Highest priority, stopping the leak. Let me just ask Mr. Hayward, is your presence here today in any way interfering with that #1 task of stopping the leak?
It is not.
Thank you. Let me ask you let me just make a statement for clarification. I am not going to apologize to you. It was, after all, BP executives who were on that rig, BP executives who ultimately could have made the call to stop operations when things became unsafe, and ultimately you are the person at the top and you are responsible. We lost 11 men on that rig, or Transocean and other companies lost 11 men on that rig. I don't feel that apologies are in order, but Mr. Chairman, I do have serious questions about the setup of this fund that we heard about from the White House yesterday, and I hope this committee will stay engaged in the oversight of that activity as well. It's still disturbing to me that we have not had anyone from the federal regulatory side. We've brought a ton of other people in here and questioned them, but really we need Mr. Salazar here. We need whoever the minerals and management people were who approved that exploration plan that BP submitted that was woefully inadequate. Shame on you, Mr. Hayward, for submitting it, but shame on us for accepting it with just simply a rubber stamp. Now I've got some questions that I do need to ask. BP, unfortunately, is not the first time you've been in front of our committee. And in 2006, although you were not CEO in September of that year, I pulled the transcript last night and looked through it again. There was a big oil spill in Alaska, had to do with not proper maintenance on the pipelines. And when you came in, you said you were going to focus like a laser beam on safety. And certainly that had to be welcome news after Texas City, after the North Slope accident. So what safety briefings do you get as your office of Chief Executive Officer, and who provides them to you?
The basis of our management of safety performance is through something that we call our Group Operating Risk Committee. It's a committee that I set up, I chair. It involves the heads of all of the business streams, and we meet on a bi-monthly basis to review the safety performance across the company. That process is mirrored down through the company.
And what type of safety directives then, or what type of directives do you issue in terms of safety as a result of those meetings? And perhaps would you be willing to share some of that information with the committee as we go forward?
We can certainly share that information with the committee. That they range from changes to procedures to requirements to have people where there are issues with safety to come and present to us.
But somebody records minutes during those meetings, and then your directives that come as a consequence of those briefings are written down and delivered to the appropriate managers on the ground?
There are minutes of those meetings.
I beg your pardon?
There are minutes of those meetings.
Let me ask you this. And Mr. Stupak already alluded to the fact that should we allow someone who's perhaps not following the best practices, drilling practices, to continue to drill, is there any other well, to your knowledge, in the Gulf of Mexico that has been done in the same manner as this well that was being drilled under the Deepwater Horizon?
There are many wells in the Gulf of Mexico.
Are there any other wells where you haven't put the proper number of centralizers in?
There are many wells in the Gulf of Mexico that have the same casing design. There are many wells that have been drilled where the same cement procedure has been.
Now, have the Minerals and Management Service people been there and looked over those with a fine-tooth comb?
Everything that we do is subject to regulatory oversight.
Are you changing your procedures at those wells as a result of things that you've encountered in your investigation with
as
the
we
Deepwater?
learn, apologies. As we learn from our investigation, we will make appropriate changes, as I've already indicated.
Are there any of those changes that are ongoing right now?
Well, the ones that I've talked about are ongoing.
Well, let me ask you this. The question came up about centralizers, and someone said that they'd rather push some more cement or squeeze more cement than get something stuck. I'm not technically savvy enough to know exactly about that, but if that's the statement and you're going to push cement and deal with a fewer number of centralizers to hold this thing steady in the center of the column, is there any way to find out that in fact that cement went where you intended it to do, and that rod didn't in fact get off to one side or the other?
I wasn't part of the decision-making process on this well. I've looked at the material.
Now, that's not the question I asked you. Was there a procedure that could have been followed that back given that information?
I can't answer that question.
Well, there is.
I'm not a cement engineer, I'm afraid.
there is, and those people were available, and for whatever reason, they decided not to do that. Do you think that might have made a difference in the ultimate story of the Deepwater Horizon?
I'm not prepared to speculate on what may or may not have made a difference until such time as the multiple investigations that are ongoing are concluded.
Well, but prior to April 20th, when the well blew up, were you briefed on the progress of the drilling of the Mankato well?
The only knowledge I had of the Macondo well occurred in April, when it was evident to the team drilling it that we had made a discovery, and they notified myself that we made a discovery. That was my only prior involvement in the well.
Who briefed you? Who briefed you on that discovery?
The person who would have briefed me would have been the chief executive of exploration and production.
And were you privy then to any other information, the difficulties that they'd had, the multiple gas kicks, the losing the tools down the hole, the length of time they've been over the hole, the decisions to move quickly because we'd spent too much time over this well?
I had no prior knowledge.
Who would have had that information?
Certainly the drilling team in the Gulf of Mexico.
But you're the CEO of the company. And do you have any sort of technical expert who helps you with these things who might have been there?
With respect, sir, we drill hundreds of wells a year all around the world.
Yeah, I know, that's what's scaring me right now. Did you have a technical expert who was advising you there on this well? Because we've heard from other people that there were problems. It was a bad well. It was a dangerous well. Gas kicks, and the mud was not degasified or whatever the procedure was. So did you have a technical expert advising you?
I had no prior knowledge or involvement in the drilling of this well. None whatsoever.
Well, then who was? If you're the CEO of the company, if I'm a shareholder of BP, which I'm not, but if I am, how can I then have comfort that the CEO knows what's going on as far as safety on the rigs? Or is it true that it's just all about profit?
There was a drilling team providing oversight of this well.
There was a drilling team.
I'm going to have to go to Mr. Waxman.
All right.
Mr. Waxman, for questions, please.